Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Our next guests are the team behind the film To Dust, the story of a Hasidic man so deeply affected by the death of his wife and the lack of time he was given to grieve, he obsesses about what happens to the human body after burial. The film is spiritual, beautiful, and often very, very funny. Let's take a look.
You are a scientist?
I'm a science teacher.
I have questions.
I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to be of service to you, Rabbi.
I'm not a rabbi.
I have a faculty meeting very soon.
I'm having some bad ideas in my head. My wife, she died.
Oh, I'm very sorry.
And these images I'm having those, they just...
Things got you down?
They have me real down.
Well, I'm still not sure
Last night, it was her too. The nail cracked. It had browned.
Maybe you need a podiatrist. Look, I'm sorry for your troubles, Rabbi, truly.
I'm not a rabbi.
But I have these papers to grade, and I wish you luck, really, friend.
This is sinful that I'm here.
Everybody, please welcome Shawn Snyder Géza Röhrig. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Congratulations. I loved your film. I was affected by it, but it also it made me laugh a lot, which one of the great things about sort of seeing festival movies is there's very little out there about them, and you get surprised by something like that. And the film doesn't necessarily open with a lot of laughs, but it builds to some wonderful moments, especially between Matthew Broderick and you. How did you think of Géza, the star of Son of Saul, not a humorous movie by any means, to be the star of this film?
We have a mutual friend who introduced us and had seen Son of Saul post-Cannes, prior to its release. And I got to see the movie beforehand. They had read my script and seen the movie, said, you guys have to meet. And so when I saw Son of Saul, I think that I was the only human being in the entire world who watched it trying to figure out whether or not Géza Röhrig could be funny. And first of all, it was like an audition for our movie. He could dig, he could hold corpses. But I also think that there was this, there's this beautiful, the way Géza moves around that movie and moves through the camp, and despite the drama and the heart-wrenching tragedy of it, there's a Chaplin-esque quality to his movement, and there's almost a comedy to the single-minded focus and the way he skirts death and moves around that movie.
The commitment to something that is sort of so out of bounds of what everybody else is thinking about and committed to in that space.
Yeah, and so I knew it felt perfect. We obviously have a very dialogue-heavy movie, and that's not a very dialogue-heavy movie, so we needed to meet and talk a little bit to figure that out. But it was very much love at first sight when we met. Géza's own religiosity made me very intimidated when you read the script. You know, whether we dabble in blasphemy but never intend to lampoon. It's a conversation. It's not pitting science against religion. So when Géza came back and had an appreciation for it, there was definitely a sense of kindred spirituality. And I always felt, after seeing Son of Saul, which is about a man who feels like this body, who might or might not be his son, deserves a proper Jewish burial.
There are very clear similarities between the two movies.
And our film, which is about a very religious man who is not satisfied with the proper religious burial because of his own deep and deeply personal grief. I always said that it was our film was the photo negative of Son of Saul in many ways. And Géza, it was your agent on set who told me that you, in your beautiful Hungarian poet way, said that you had to do this movie because it rhymed with Son of Saul. And I think there's a beautiful dialogue between the films.
Yeah. Géza, what did you think when you first got the script? And did you see it as a comedy? Do you see things as a comedy when you're playing them, or do you just try to play them for the reality of the situation?
Well, it is a comedy, but it's a very hybrid sort of a movie, because if it's a comedy, then it's really a pitch black comedy. It's very personal, and there's a huge vacuum, a loss, a time that nobody wants to go through, but eventually we all go through when we lose a truly loved one. So when I first read the script, I was so fresh to me. It was so great to see that this movie tackles an issue, an aspect of death that usually people run away from, and that is the somatic aspect of death. You see, we are deluged with the emotional and all other dimensions of death. But when we go through such loss, it's very hard not to think of the body of the loved one, you know, like what is going on, where, especially before the funeral, like where is it, right? Is it refrigerated, but should I be there, or what's the right way to do this? And when a person dies, you know, there is this double powerlessness that we feel. On the one hand, why double? Because the corpse is very powerless. It's totally can't protect itself. Because of its immobility, right? So that's powerless, number one. And there's this powerless number two on our end, because we can't do a damn thing about it. We can't make him or her alive. And then when I say him or her, really, it's not him or her that much. We know it's became already an it. It's a thing. It's just a body. Yet it's sort of a liminal stage. He's not alive yet, but he's not entirely dead either. He's not buried, for God's sake. He's hardly cooled, right? So this mad immediacy after someone's passing is what the stage that somehow Shmuel, the lead role of this movie, somehow gets stuck. And it's usually the bereaved passes on quite fast, but he, for some reason, have an extremely hard time to let it go. And that is when Albert comes in, Matthew Broderick, and this friendship forms, which eventually turns out to be having some real healing faculties. And, you know, in some way, it definitely has I won't call it happy end, but you know, a good end, a wholesome end, the movie.
Shmuel's kind of living in this place where the place where you still refer to the body as her body rather than the body, right? Like he's kind of can't get over the fact that that body is not really his wife anymore in some ways.
I mean, we should be the last one to label this easily. I mean, we sooner or later will be in his shoes. You know, we lose parents and we lose loved ones, and it's so usually in the normalcy of life. You know, we can be quite rational, but even people, let's say, who are absolutely not religious, when it comes to death, there's something sacred about death. I mean, I was just thinking on the way here, why is that communists, who are really, as an ideology, they forced by police on their society's atheism as the ruling philosophy, and yet look at Moscow. They embalmed Lenin and they put a mausoleum around him. Sofia, Dimitrov, all these communist leaders have their own pyramids. I mean, these people don't supposed to be in God. So what is going on? Why, when it comes to death, I see this in Jewish community, people who don't regularly go to synagogue, who have no affiliation, who have no rabbi, they can't really deal with the situation, and they sort of, well, let tradition take charge, and then they like call a rabbi who they usually are not in touch with, say, just, can you deal with this? Because this is the ultimate question of life, and that's why I think when it comes to talk about science and religion, and there was this almost blind belief in the 19th century that science is going to be the alpha male in modernity, in the intellectual world, like religion should really take the back seat. It's outdated, it belongs to a bygone age, it's stupid, it's primitive, it's immature. And what I have to say about it's no, because they are entirely different things. Science tells you how life is, and religion tells you how life ought to be. They're two different things. And that is why I say that both these things, religion and science, can be misused and abused, as we saw it in the Spanish Inquisition or the passivity of the European Church during Hitler. But guess what? Science also can be terrible if it ends up in the wrong hands. See Auschwitz or Hiroshima, which is all very scientific if you think about it. So the answer for bad religion is not no religion, but good religion. And the answer for bad science is not no science, but good science.
I agree. I feel this so trivial asking this next question.
Bring it on. Our movie goes back and forth between the highbrow and the
Matthew
lowbrow.
Broderick is wonderful in this film, and he's kind of playing, I felt like a classic Matthew Broderick character in some ways, which is something that maybe started with Election or right around that time. And I don't just mean a teacher, I just mean a kind of like a every man who's sort of slightly befuddled but just trying to like live his life in some ways. And it's such a strange thing because he is like a city kid and like grew up in the city and is kind of a cosmopolitan guy, but yet he's so great at these roles. How did you think of him for this, and what was it like approaching him for it?
It was amazing approaching him for it. It was, as you said, he's in roles like this, and maybe that was one of the reasons it wasn't this obvious choice, but it was inspired when we arrived at it. And I go from, I just, this film has been a dream. It's been surreal. I just finished coursework at NYU. I stumbled across this intensely personal and odd project, oddly specific. You know, on a page it looks very strange and maybe unachievable. And I get the support of these lovely producers. And all of a sudden, everyone, you imagined you might be able to ask about this role, all of a sudden we're able to ask. And it was just a light bulb went off when we thought about Matthew, and when we met, we just dived in. He responded to the material in this really deep way, and was incredibly gracious and passionate, coming on to our incredibly humble and guerrilla sort of shoot to make this movie. And it was perfect. It's in the ways that it fits within his body of work, in the ways that it kind of challenges and broadens it. It was really exciting to have him in this film.
How did you find that you balanced, I think you do it well, but the humor and the sadness of the film? Because it's always kind of not just, they're in conversation with each other a lot of the time, but how did you manage that? Is that something that you were thinking about constantly while shooting, or did you shoot lots of different ways and then get into the edit room and really figure it out?
There's probably some pig jokes that ended up on the cutting room floor. My writing partner, Jason Begay, and I, he's my Goy writing partner, the Albert to my Shmuel. I think that as soon as the idea was conceived, it was always darkly comic. And I think we surprised ourselves in the writing about how actively comic it could be. But it's a tonal tightrope. It swerves between philosophy, intellectualism, spirituality, religion, science, and humor, which at times feels vaudevillian or Borscht Belt, which is sort of part of the Jewish roots and the Jewish fabric of the film. There was this leap of faith that we were walking this tonal tightrope, and obviously pulling these actors and these voices together. And I think the odd couple of Géza and Matthew was part of what really brought it to life. And one of the things that I've come to love the most about the movie is the ways in which Géza is funny. And I think that Matthew often plays the straight, if you think about the Nathan Lane collaborations, that Matthew often plays the straight man. What I love about these performances are the ways in which Géza is funny and the ways in which Matthew is heartbreaking. And the ways in which the funniest things in the movie are also the most heartbreaking things in the movie. And there's a question about it, does it pinball back and forth between humor, or is it that type of thing that makes you laugh 1 second and then on another viewing makes you cry, or on further reflection makes you cry? And if we could contain those both at the same time. But I also think with such a dark, dark topic, that humor sort of was, helps us swallow that pill in life as in the film, and we sort of needed to shatter the taboos with the humor and disrupt the discomfort with the humor. And you said it slowly builds in the movie, and it's designed in such a way that you're not sure whether you're supposed to laugh or are allowed to laugh until the laughter becomes cathartic.
Well, if you aren't laughing by the time Broderick shows up, once Broderick shows up, you sort of get permission, I think,
you're
to laugh.
allowed
Because
to,
that
yeah.
relationship becomes, I mean, as soon as he walks into the community college, it's like, oh, he's going in a very absurd direction now.
And one of the other things that I always feel, this movie is ultimately about the right to grieve in an intensely personal way, because grief has an infinite number of shades that are as specific as the relationship between the mourner and the person who is lost. And religion, and the way we grieve it, in Judaism is so psychologically and spiritually and poetically profound, and yet if it doesn't fit you in that moment, the grief can extend beyond the bounds of it, and this movie is about permission to the right to personal belief, the right to personal meaning, and in this case, the right to grieve as we grieve. And so there's obviously the explicit narrative of Shmuel going through this process, but this film has its roots in the loss of my own mother. And this film, 9 years on, is very much my way of grieving, and to grieve through art, and to grieve through cinema, and to grieve through humor, and to have those be powerfully cathartic and powerfully spiritual ways for me to grieve and to process grief, is, I think, the narrative of sort of why this movie, why this tone, why it arrived here.
People often forget that within, when you are grieving, there is such a hystericalness that it can build incredible humor and jokes. I remember some of the most deepest moments of grief in my life, finding moments where you were just doubled over laughing hysterically because you were so in need of that catharsis, and other people are like, why would you be laughing,
Put fun back to funeral.
Yeah, right? I think we need more fun in funerals than we need in bombing. I think we need more fun in funerals. Yeah. But people fart at funerals. I mean, that's, and I remember being in the limousine back from my grandmother's funeral, and I watched my mother watch her mother pass away far too soon before I watched my own mother pass away. And watching my mother grieve her mother and watching my mother lose her mother and was very instructive to the ways in which I wanted to honor my mother with my own grief. I remember cracking up. My dad and my sister are in the back. On the way home from my grandmother's funeral, I remember we were in stitches. And I don't remember what it was about, but I remember how profoundly comforting it was. The night after my mother passed away, I remember going home. I'm gonna get choked up here because my dad and my sister are here. But the party was on TV.
The Peter Sellers?
Peter Sellers movie. And my dad sat me down and said, you have to watch this.
Wow. Yeah.
There's lots of anxiety, and I think it's not by accident that death couples up with humor, because anxiety is unbearable at one point, and you just want to release it whatever path or way you can, and humor is a great tool and vehicle to do that. It's not humor that is disrespectful at all, but it sort of confronts the absurdity of death, because it's a very, very complex relationship we have with death. Because on the one hand, this day and age, the society spares us to experience death pretty much, and we naturally flee from it. But yet, I think we are also attracted to it some way. We are fascinated by it, and so we want to gaze it, but we want to gaze it like this, So I think when death is not part of our everyday life, when generally the dead body is taken out of sight immediately and is being handled like Japanese cars, which are basically come and are made with no human touch. Everything is, so someone, someone does take care of it. It's a phone call and then grandpa is away. But art is here, so to speak, to compensate the loss that we are missing out by not experiencing death. And especially, there's a whole other aspect here, is that Shmuel has 2 children. So he's not just responsible for himself, he has 2 sons. Now that's a whole different ballgame, and I think it should be spoken about too, how a parent, a surviving spouse, should deal during child rearing. How does he do it right? Is it appropriate? Sometimes not, but then in the next scene he says to his sons, I'm sorry. There's room to make mistakes if you're able to apologize for it in a serious way. So there's a lot to learn from this movie, I believe.
I would say there's no better way to sell this film. I don't mean to use such a cynical word, than you with tears in your eyes referencing The Party. That seems like that's like a great, tonally, that's exactly kind of what this film really is, in my opinion. Yeah.
I'm gonna run with that.
Any interview you do, anywhere you go, just get yourself a little tear and be like, The Party.
But I mean, I think that humor is humility. I don't think that humor is disrespectful. I think that it humbles us, but for the human condition, and I feel that, that deeply. And I think that Judaism, like Jewish wit, is such a, you look at the history of the Jewish people, right? It's like laughing in the face of the Holocaust, to some extent, because it's like, damn it, I'm still here. I can laugh. I'm alive. It's Mel Brooks.
A documentary just came out last year about jokes and Holocaust jokes told by Jews, right?
Yeah, and you can go back into sort of rabbinical fantasies and Jewish folklore and Isaac Bashevis Singer, but the alphabet of Ben Sira, and Jews are cracking jokes as far back as you can dig.
It's a form of resistance, humor, and that is why whenever you have a dictatorship, the censorship always, you can forbid sort of newspapers and radios and TV channels and all that, but the power of mouth, what do you say? The power of mouth. That's what I say. The people tell jokes to each other, and that's such a sure way and a tiny miniature way that you can always laugh the person on the top. Even though you can't gather publicly, you can't publish. They are listening and wiretapping and do their best. I mean, I grew up in communism. I know what I'm talking about. And yet, no one can forbid jokes in a bus stop, just quietly said. And that goes to the next guy, So it carries a power.
Let's get some questions from our audience. Here's a question right here. Hey.
Hi, lovely to see you both. Szeretném megköszönni a show-t. Nagyon büszke magyar filmes diák vagyok, köszönöm szépen.
Nagyon szívesen.
Sorry, I had to say something in Hungarian. I had to thank him.
Amazing.
I'm really interested in the relation between your work as an actor now and as a poet. How does it channel through? How does that work?
To be honest, I primarily am a poet. I love acting, but acting really relies if a really good script comes your way or not. Even if there is a good script like ours, it's an under $1 million film. It's actually made from less money than Son of Saul, because Son of Saul was $1.5 million. And so it's really a teamwork movie, and when you are a creative person, it's very hard to just wait until all the conditions come together for a movie. So I must and I have to write poems in between roles, because I'm not just taking any stupid TV role. I'm not doing this for money, Thanks for the question.
Next question.
Hey guys, I know it's this particular film's tackling on a very serious subject, but I was wondering, did the humor at all keep things light on set?
I think that the humor did keep things light on set as much as set was like, again, Géza alluded to the budget, and this was, you talk about
go.
You talk about a film at our budget level, and you're advised, one location, 2 people, 14 days. We have kids. We have an live animal. We have rain machines. And somehow the love that went into making this movie also meant that it was our days were packed. It was beautifully grueling, but we were moving locations so often, turning locations into 3 locations, getting at 9 pages, 9-10 pages a day sometimes. So I think that there was a levity and a love on set and a joy in what we were doing, but we were very focused.
We had to be, yeah. But I have to say at this point, Matthew Broderick is a really funny guy anyway, not just in this movie, but in real life as well.
Guys, I love the film. Congratulations. It's really beautiful. It's at the Tribeca Film Festival right now. What are the screenings? Excuse me?
We're screening tonight at 6:30. Tomorrow, I should know the times, tomorrow afternoon, and Saturday night at 9 p.m.
Fantastic. And afterwards, people will be able to see the film. Yeah?
Yeah, well,
Yes,
we'll
sorry.
figure that out. That's the plan.
Please, everybody give Shawn and Géza a round of applause. Let's hear it.
Thank you.